Hello again, my name is Kevin Mack and welcome to the Well Documented Nerd. Again, if you want to see more of these videos, please feel free to hit the subscribe button. Today's video is another in a series I'm doing about D&D Beyond. So for those who haven't seen the previous videos, I'm a dungeon master. I have a group of people that are very new to D&D, and I thought I'd put together these videos sort of talking about the different elements of a character, how you play with them, and what you're dealing with when you look at D&D Beyond. So today's topic is skills. So what are skills? What do they do? So let's look over at D&D Beyond and start to sort of look at what these skills are. So skills are one of those key elements of your character. And really the purpose behind skills is that skills are what your character's good at. And these are largely role play opportunities. So these are things that'll come up a lot in role play. They will sometimes in combat, but in my experience, they really come up in a lot of role play scenarios on the types of things your character's good at. And what you'll often hear from DMs, or if you've ever watched Critical Role or listened to Critical Hit or another podcast, what you'll hear is a lot of people say things like, roll an investigation check for me, roll a perception check, roll an athletics check. Anytime you hear roll a blank check, what they're talking about is a skill. And what they're doing is asking your character to leverage their abilities, which we talked about in a previous video, leverage their ability scores combined with the things they've learned over time to really use those skills to their benefit. Now, what we're looking at here is a character of mine. So this is a character I'm playing in my wife's campaign. It's a level 1 tiefling artificer named Vulcan Smedan. But the key part we're talking about today is skills. So last time we talked about ability scores, which was all of this area right here. And then we talked about this and we talked about this. Today we're going to talk about skills. Now, where do I find skills as the first part of this? Skills are found right here. So right in this big section in the middle where you'll see prof, mod, skill, and bonus. Now, what are these skills? If we look down the list, there's a pretty decent sized list here of skills that we have at our disposal. And you notice a lot of these have different modifiers already showing up for them. Some of them are marked proficient, and some of them aren't. If I hover over here, you can see that the prof means proficiency. So whenever you would hear your DM say, all right, I want you to roll a perception check, that means that you would roll this and add this modifier. Or roll an investigation check. As you can tell, because my character's got higher intelligence and a proficiency here, I get a +6 modifier to investigation. So if he's actually digging in and looking for something and taking time, he's really good at finding it. But if he's just walking through a room, he's pretty terrible at noticing things. But these are all the different skills that I could have. And your DM will ask you for specific skills and say, roll this check. Or if you're doing a skills challenge, which is a whole nother video we're going to talk about, in a skills challenge, you would have to explain what you want to do and then tie it to a skill here. So the idea being, like if I said, okay, look, I'm going to, if I'm in a skills challenge and I've got a bunch of guards in front of me, for example, okay, and I said, look, my character's going to jump over and try to flip over top of them. All right, my DM would probably look at me and say, all right, roll an acrobatics check for that. All right, that means I would roll a d20 and I would add a +3 for acrobatics. So whatever I got, I roll a +3. And if that's above the difficulty class, which the DM knows and is probably not sharing, then I would pass that challenge. But other examples of skills checks would be, and I'm going to go through some of the higher level ones here. Let's say I get busted by a group of towns guard and they're asking me, what are you doing here? And I decide I'm going to spin a lie and I'm going to say like, oh no, I was just here and all of a sudden these crazy people showed up and I had nothing to do with it. The DM's going to say, yeah, roll a deception check for me. I would roll a d20, I would add a +4, and that would be my deception check. So that's another example of how this works. Now, some of the common ones you're going to hear a lot of, because there are certain skills that appear quite often. And a few of them are, I'm going to start at the top, Arcana. Arcana is basically a knowledge and understanding of magic. So you get magic, you get how it works, you get how it functions. My character's an artificer, so basically an engineer when it comes to magic. So there's no surprise here that I have a +6. Now, how did I get that +6? Going back to our talk about ability scores, notice here it says it's an intelligence-based skill, +4, and I have a proficiency, that's a +2, which means I have a +6. So as my proficiency bonus goes up, this number will too. But for right now, I have a +6, which means if somebody cast a spell or it did a ritual and I wanted to try to decipher what that ritual was for, I would roll an Arcana check. If I wanted to understand how I saw them do something crazy and I want to know how they did it, that would be an Arcana check, would be a magic check. So this is a very common one you're going to hear a lot of. Another common one is acrobatics. Acrobatics, though, is pretty standard. It makes sense, right? Acrobatics is being a gymnast. If you're Dick Grayson, you're this, right? From Batman. But looking down through here, athletics. Athletics is basically what you would think about. It's running, lifting, jumping, these kind of standard athletic activities and how good you are at them. Deception, we already talked about, is lying. And you'll notice this is charisma based. This one you're going to see a lot out of, insight. So insight is a skill that basically allows you to see if you can guess the motives of the person you're talking to. So let's say I'm talking to a guy, criminal, and the criminal tells me, oh, no, you should totally take that path. It's 100% safe. You'll have no problems. And the guy seems kind of shady to me. I might say to the DM, do I really believe this guy? Like, do I think he's on the level? And he'll say, roll an insight check. He or she will say, roll an insight check. At which point I roll a d20 and I add this modifier. And if it's high enough, they'll look at me and say something to the effect of, yeah, you think he's on the level. Or no, you think he's pretty terrible. Now, to be clear, you're not always going to be told by the DM whether you passed or failed the skill check. You're just going to be told the outcome. So, like, for example, if that insight check where I look over, I say, do I think this guy is trying to set me up for something? Let's say I roll a 3. DM's going to say, no, you think he's on the level. Or he'll say, you're not really quite sure. Whereas if I roll the 19, he might say, oh, you definitely know this guy's going to mug you later. Those are the different scenarios that could occur. So that's an insight, which is a wisdom-based skill. So it's based on how well you know the world around you. Another good one that you'll hear a lot of is intimidation. So if you're trying to intimidate somebody, like let's say you have a captured prisoner and you threaten them and you're like, look, if you don't want to deal with me when I'm angry and you better talk. DM might say roll an intimidation check, in which case you're going to roll an intimidation check against their insight check and see if you can break it. And if so, they're going to be scared of you. Medicine check is healing, so if you want to heal people. Another one that usually confuses people is nature. So nature is an understanding of the natural world. So if you want to look at sort of how animals behave or how spirits behave or how the world works, that understanding of how the world functions, how nature itself functions in the natural world is nature. Another common one you're going to hear a lot of is perception. If I had to guess, this is probably the single most used skill in D&D, because you will constantly say, like, do I notice? And the minute you say that, DM's going to respond with roll perception check, because it's whether your character notices things around them or not. Another one is persuasion. So the difference between deception and persuasion is a good conversation to have, because to be honest, most people question what does this mean? What's the difference? Aren't they the same thing? No, deception is you are openly lying and how good of a liar you are. Persuading is how good you are at just convincing people to do things. So like the difference would be, I gave the example of the guards saw me after an altercation. They said, what are you doing here? And I tried to spin a lie. Whereas persuasion is, look, no, I was here in the fight, but that guy is evil and I'm trying to stop him. And you should really be helping me, not hurting me. That's a persuasion check, because nothing I said about that is a lie, but I need help. and that's persuading them. Another big one you're going to hear a lot of is stealth. So stealth is your ability to hide and not be seen and move accordingly. So your stealth checks will be how good you are at sneaking by people without being noticed. So let's say I try to duck into a crowd and sneak past a guard that's looking for me. That's a stealth check. Or hey, I try to sneak in the shadows around behind them and go unnoticed. That's a stealth check. So this core block here in the middle is all your skills and how they work. And every time you're asked for a skills check, to be clear, it's a D20 plus this modifier. And that's what will determine if you succeed or fail. Now, there are going to be times where your DM might say something to the effect of roll with advantage or with disadvantage. Okay? And what that means is the DM is basically saying the conditions of the check are such that you either have an advantage or you have a disadvantage to work against. So the idea here being, like, to give an example of an advantage scenario is, let's say we do that stealth check and I'm trying to sneak by this guy, and the guy decides that, or the guy is a bit of a drunk, and I've been watching him and he's been drinking all night and he's been drinking heavy and he's drunk, and I'm trying to sneak past a guy who's drunk and 3/4 of the way passed out. In older versions of D&D, you might have given a modifier for that. D&D 5e has really simplified this so that what you would do is say, okay, I'm going to make I'm going to give you advantage on that check. And what that means is you roll 2 d20s and you take the higher. So the benefit of that is whenever I roll my stealth check, I roll 2 d20s. Say one comes back a 5, one comes back a 10, and I have a stealth of +5. That means I got a 15. 10 plus my modifier. So it disadvantages when the circumstances are working against you. Like, for example, if I'm behind bars and I'm trying to persuade a new guard that just came on shift that I'm really a good guy and he should let me out, yeah, that I would, as a DM, I would rule that as a disadvantage scenario because he already thinks you're a criminal. So why would he listen to you if I allowed you to roll for that at all? Okay? So again, the way these work is you're trying to get above a DC. So a DM will either have a written DC or a DC they came up with where they say you have to get better than a 15 to pass. And if I roll a 10 with my modifier, I fail and something happens, or if I get above a 15, it passes. So these are how skill checks function. So at the end of the day, like I said, the proficiency is based around more than likely your class. You were given the ability to choose specific things you're proficient in. Like being an artificer, I'm proficient in Arcana. That's part of the deal. Being a criminal, I'm proficient in Deception. That's part of the deal. But that gives my additional +2 bonus over. So this is skills. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you found this helpful. Like I said, there will be more of these coming out, so please watch for them to come. Thank you, and have a great, and I hope your die rolls always come up in your favor.